9 young Soviet engineers gather around a wooden table in January 1959. Maps spread everywhere, tea steaming, cigarettes burning. They're planning the adventure of their lives, a winter trek through the brutal North Urals. 200 miles of frozen wilderness. These aren't reckless kids, they're experienced hikers, smart, prepared, but something's going to happen out there on Dead Mountain. Something so impossible that 60 years later, we still don't have answers. Their journals, their photographs, their final camp, all frozen in time, waiting to tell you a story that defies explanation. Get comfortable tonight. Pull those covers up. This is one of those stories that gets under your skin and stays there. If you're new here, welcome to Sleepy Holidays. We dig deep into history's most compelling mysteries. Hit subscribe if you want more stories like this. And hey, drop a comment. Where are you listening from? And what time is it there? I love hearing from you all. Tonight we're heading into the frozen Urals of 1959. 9 friends, 1 mountain, a mystery that still haunts investigators today. Unforeseen departure, the call of the wild. Ural Polytechnic Institute, Yekaterinburg. The winter of 1959 hits hard, but inside these thick walls, excitement cuts through the bitter cold. 9 engineering students crowd around Professor Igor Dyatlov, maps covering every inch of the table, supply lists scribbled on scraps of paper, the smell of strong tea and nervous energy filling the room. They're planning something ambitious, something that will test everything they think they know about survival. Mount Autopsy, 215 miles through the North Urals. In February, unforeseen departure, the call of the wild. Look at these young faces. Igor Dyatlov, 23, the expedition leader, steady, methodical, the kind of guy who triple-checks his gear. Zineda Kolmogorova, 22, one of only 2 women on the team, tough as winter itself. Rustem Slobodin, 23, the joker who keeps everyone's spirits up. Yuri Doroshenko, 21, always ready with his mandolin when the day's hiking is done. These aren't strangers throwing together a weekend trip. They've been hiking together for years. Trust runs deep between them. Unforeseen departure, the call of the wild. The plan sounds straightforward enough. Ski north from the railroad town of Ivdel. Follow old logging roads through the forest. Cross the Ural Ridge. Reach Mount Autopsy and plant their flag. Then ski back south to civilization. 3 weeks total. It's the kind of expedition that earns you the highest certification in Soviet mountaineering, Category 3, elite status. But there's something about this particular route that makes the locals uncomfortable. The indigenous Mansi people have stories about these mountains. Old stories, dark ones, unforeseen departure, the call of the wild. They spread the maps wider, trace routes with calloused fingers. The Ural Mountains in winter. It's not exactly a vacation spot. Temperatures drop to -40. Winds that'll knock you sideways. Snow so deep you can disappear completely if you step off the wrong trail. But that's exactly what draws them. The challenge. The raw test of skill and endurance. Igor's been planning this expedition for months. Every detail calculated. Every possible scenario considered. At least, every scenario they could imagine. Unforeseen departure. The call of the wild. Ludmila Dubinina, 20, the second woman on the team, medical student, always carrying her journal, documenting everything. Alexander Kolovatov, 24, the quiet one who knows these mountains better than most. Yuri Yudin, 21, solid as granite, but nursing a bad knee. And the 2 youngest, Nikolai Thibault-Briginal, 23, with his French surname that makes everyone stumble over the pronunciation. George Krivonishenko, 24, the photographer who's already planning what shots he'll capture on Mount Autopsy. Unforeseen departure, the call of the wild. The gear check takes hours. Soviet equipment from 1959, it's heavy, canvas and wool instead of modern synthetics. But it's proven, tested. The tent they'll share is military surplus, designed to handle Siberian conditions. Sleeping bags rated for extreme cold, skis with cable bindings. Each person carries about 60 pounds of gear and food. They've done this before, shorter trips, but the principles are the same. Stay together, stay warm, stay smart. Simple rules that have kept them alive through dozens of winter expeditions. Unforeseen departure. The call of the wild. But there's something different about this expedition. You can feel it in the room, a tension that wasn't there during their previous trips. Maybe it's the distance. 200 miles is serious business. Maybe it's the timing. February in the Urals tests even experienced mountaineers. Or maybe it's something else entirely, something none of them can quite put their finger on. The conversations are a little too loud, the laughter a little too forced, like they're trying to convince themselves this is just another adventure. Unforeseen departure, the call of the wild. They've been through enough together to read each other's moods. Summer expeditions in the Urals, weekend trips to nearby peaks. That time they got caught in a blizzard and had to dig a snow cave for 3 days. They've seen each other scared, exhausted, pushed to the limit. But they've also seen each other rise to the challenge every single time. It's created a bond deeper than friendship. More like family. Brothers and sisters who happen to share a passion for putting themselves against nature's worst. Unforeseen departure, the call of the wild. The final preparations stretch late into the night. Food rations carefully weighed and distributed. Camera film wrapped in waterproof packets. Journals tucked into inner pockets where body heat will keep the ink from freezing. Rustam's mandolin gets special padding. Can't have entertainment without his music around the evening fire. They'll need those moments of warmth and laughter once they're out there in the endless white silence of the Ural winter. Human connection becomes everything when civilization disappears behind you. Unforeseen departure, the call of the wild. Igor spreads the route map one final time. His finger traces their planned path through the wilderness. Day by day, camp by camp. Contingency routes marked in red ink. Bailout points if weather turns impossible. Supply caches buried the previous summer. It's methodical planning that would make any expedition leader proud. But as his finger reaches Mount Autorten, there's a moment of hesitation. Just for a second. Something about that final approach feels different. Wrong somehow. But he shakes it off. Mountaineers don't trust superstition. Unforeseen departure, the call of the wild. January 23rd, 1959. Departure day arrives with clear skies and bitter cold. They gather at the train station, massive packs strapped tight, skis bundled together. The platform echoes with laughter and nervous energy. Other travelers stare at this group of young people, heading voluntarily into the frozen wilderness, while everyone else is trying to escape winter. But that's exactly what drives them. The call to test themselves against something bigger and more powerful than they are. To prove they belong in these mountains. Unforeseen departure, the call of the wild. The train whistle cuts through the morning air. Final hugs with friends and family staying behind. Last-minute gear adjustments. Igor checks his watch against the station clock. Everything's on schedule. Everything's according to plan. They board the eastbound train with confidence earned through years of experience. But as the locomotive pulls away from the platform, heading toward the vast wilderness of the northern Urals, none of them know they're beginning a journey that will end in mystery so profound it still haunts us today. Journey commences. Trains and Tales. January 25th, 1959. Platform 12 at Sverdlovsk railway station. Steam hisses from the locomotive as 9 young hikers board the eastbound train. Backpacks stuffed with expedition gear, skis strapped together like giant matchsticks. They're heading into the Urals, toward mountains that most Soviet citizens will never see. Igor Dyatlov checks his watch. Departure in 15 minutes. Behind them, the industrial smokestacks of the city fade into winter fog. Ahead, 200 miles of wilderness that will test everything they think they know about survival. The train lurches forward with that familiar Soviet railway grinding steel on steel, picking up momentum as Yekaterinburg disappears behind them. In the passenger car, the team claims a section near the back. Rustam Slobodin pulls out his mandolin before they've even cleared the city limits. The other passengers, mostly workers heading to timber camps, they don't mind the music. In fact, some start humming along. There's something about train travel that makes strangers into temporary friends. And these 9, they're already family, bound together by months of planning. Here's the thing about Soviet train tickets in 1959. They were expensive, way beyond a student's budget for this kind of distance. So the team developed what you might call creative ticketing strategies. When the conductor made his rounds, half the group would disappear under the wooden benches, cramped between luggage and spare boots. The others would spread out their gear, claiming the missing hikers had stepped off at the last station for tea. Risky? Absolutely. But they were 20 years old and felt invincible. The adventure had already begun. Picture this scene. It's evening now. Somewhere between Verkhoturye and Ivdel, the train car lit by dim overhead bulbs, swaying gently as they navigate mountain curves. Rustam's mandolin fills the space with folk melodies, while Luda Dubanina leads the group in song. Her voice carries that clear, confident tone that makes everyone else want to join in. Even the serious ones like Thibaut Brignal are smiling, tapping their feet against the floor. Outside the frosted windows, pine forests stretch endlessly into darkness. Inside, warmth, laughter. The kind of joy that only comes before great challenges. Zina Kolmogorova has her journal out, writing by lamplight while the others sing. She's documenting everything, the excitement, the nervous energy, the way Igor keeps checking his maps even though they won't reach their starting point for another day. These details matter to her. Years of hiking have taught her that expeditions live or die in the small moments, the preparation, the team dynamics before you ever touch real wilderness. She writes about Rustam's music, about how Krivonishenko keeps everyone laughing with his jokes. Good signs, strong team cohesion. The temperature outside has dropped to -30°C, but inside the train car, it's almost tropical compared to what's waiting for them. Through the windows they catch glimpses of settlements, single lights in the darkness, smoke from chimneys barely visible against the star-filled sky. These are the last signs of normal human life they'll see for weeks. Mining towns, logging camps, places where people work hard and sleep warm. The contrast isn't lost on them. In 3 days they'll be sleeping in tents, hoping their body heat keeps them alive. Someone breaks out a deck of cards around midnight. They're playing Durak, that classic Russian game where losing means wearing the fool's crown. Alexander Kolovatov is terrible at it, which surprises everyone since he's usually so sharp with strategy and planning. But cards are different from avalanche assessment or route finding. Pure luck mixed with psychology. While they play, the train rocks them like a giant cradle, that hypnotic rhythm of wheels on tracks. A few passengers are already asleep in other sections, but not this group. Too excited, too alive with possibility. Igor Dyatlov has been quiet for the last hour, studying topographical maps by lamplight. As expedition leader, he feels the weight of responsibility, 9 lives depending on his decisions. The others trust him completely, and that trust is both a gift and a burden. He traces their planned route with his finger, through the forest, up the river valley, across the pass to Mount Otorten. On paper it looks manageable, but paper doesn't show wind chill or snow depth, or the 1,000 tiny things that can go wrong in winter mountains. The conversation turns to what they'll find up there, stories from other expeditions, legends about the northern Urals, that older hikers whisper around campfires. The Mansi people have names for those mountains that translate roughly to forbidden land or dead places, but the team treats these tales like folklore, interesting but not relevant to their modern expedition with proper gear and careful planning. They're Soviet engineering students, believers in science and preparation. Superstition feels primitive, almost embarrassing to acknowledge. They have maps, compasses, and each other. Yuri Yudin shares chocolate that his mother packed for the trip. Dark squares that taste like celebration, sweetness to fuel their dreams of reaching Mount Otorten and earning their Grade 3 hiking certification. This expedition represents the culmination of years of training, weekend trips that built their skills, summer climbs that tested their teamwork. Now the real test. Winter in the Urals isn't just about physical endurance, it's about mental toughness, about staying positive when everything hurts and the cold tries to steal your hope. Dawn comes slowly through frosted train windows, revealing a landscape that grows more wild with each mile. The settlements are smaller now, farther apart. Wooden buildings hunker down against the cold like animals seeking shelter. Smoke from chimneys rises straight up in the still air, a sure sign that serious cold is settling over the region. The team presses their faces to the glass, watching this preview of what awaits them. Some of them have never been this far north. The wilderness here isn't just remote, it's absolute. The final approach to Ivdel station brings a shift in mood. Not fear exactly, but a sobering recognition that the comfortable part of their journey is ending. Soon they'll transfer to buses, then horse-drawn sleighs, then finally their own feet and skis. Each transition takes them further from safety, deeper into country where their survival depends entirely on their training and each other. Rustam packs away his mandolin carefully, wrapping it in extra clothing. Music belongs to civilization. The wilderness ahead demands different skills entirely. As the train begins to slow, approaching Ivel through a landscape of endless white, the team gathers their gear with practiced efficiency: backpacks, skis, sleeping bags, everything they'll need to survive 2 weeks in conditions that could kill them if they make serious mistakes. But they don't think about dying. They think about success, about the satisfaction of completing something genuinely difficult, about proving to themselves that they're capable of more than they knew. The station appears ahead, small and isolated, the edge of their known world. The train stops with a final mechanical sigh, steam escaping into air so cold it seems solid. Through the windows they see Ivadel, a frontier town that feels like the last outpost of human comfort. Beyond it, wilderness that stretches for hundreds of miles, mountains that have claimed other expeditions, weather systems that care nothing for human plans or preparation. But right now, stepping onto the platform with their gear, they feel ready for anything. 9 friends against the world. The real journey starts now. Parting paths. The final frontier village. February 1st, 1959. The expedition rolls into Visay, and honestly, this is where civilization officially ends. We're talking about the absolute edge of the Soviet Union here. Beyond this tiny logging settlement, nothing but endless forest, mountains and snow that hasn't seen a human footprint in months. The 9 hikers step off their bus, breath steaming in the -20 air, laughing and stretching after hours of cramped travel. They have no idea they're looking at the last warm buildings they'll ever see. Picture this frontier outpost. Maybe 60 wooden buildings scattered along rutted roads, smoke rising from every chimney, lumberjacks in felt boots, their beards frosted white, the sound of axes echoing from the forest. And here come these 9 young engineering students from the city, all bright-eyed and excited, carrying skis and backpacks stuffed with equipment. The locals watch them with that look, you know the one, the look that says city kids have no idea what's waiting out there, and they're absolutely right. This is where things get real. No more buses. From here on, it's horse-drawn sleighs through forest roads barely wider than footpaths. The hikers load their gear onto wooden sleds, laughing as the horses stamp and snort in the cold. Igor Dyatlov checks his maps one more time, pointing toward the distant mountains. The Mansi driver shakes his head when he hears where they're headed. Dead Mountain, he calls it. Kholat Syakhl. But the students just smile. They think he's being superstitious. They're wrong about that too. But here's where the story takes its first dark turn. Yuri Yudin, remember that name? He's been fighting knee pain for days. Not just discomfort, real grinding pain that's getting worse with every step. He's trying to hide it, Doesn't want to let the team down. These are his closest friends, people he's hiked with for years. But when you're facing a 100-mile trek through waist-deep snow in sub-zero temperatures, a bad knee isn't just uncomfortable, it's potentially fatal. And Yuri knows it. So picture Yuri that night, lying in the village guest house, staring at the ceiling while his friends sleep. His knee is throbbing. He can barely put weight on it. And he's facing the hardest decision of his life. Abandon the expedition he's been planning for months, or push forward and risk becoming a liability that could endanger everyone. Outside, the wind howls through the village streets. Inside, he makes the choice that will save his life, though he doesn't know it yet. None of them do. Morning comes, and Yuri tells them, the silence that follows, you can imagine it. These friends have been planning this trek since autumn. They've studied maps together, practiced techniques, dreamed of reaching Mount Otorten, and now, at the last possible moment, their group is fracturing. Igor tries to convince him to push through the pain. Others suggest modifying the route, but Yuri has made his decision. He's turning back. The mood shifts. Reality is setting in. The wilderness doesn't care about friendship or determination. The final preparations are subdued now. The team redistributes Yuri's gear among the remaining 8 hikers. Extra food, spare batteries, emergency supplies, all divided up. They joke about having more room in the tent, more rations per person, but underneath the humor, there's tension. Expeditions are planned around specific group dynamics. 9 people have certain strengths, certain redundancies. 8 is different math. 8 is more vulnerable. But they're committed now. They've come too far to turn back just because of one injury. The goodbye moment arrives. February 1st, late morning. The horse-drawn sleighs are loaded and ready. 8 hikers climb aboard, bundled in their winter gear. Yuri stands beside the last building in the last village, watching his best friends disappear into a forest that stretches unbroken to the Arctic Ocean. They're waving, laughing, calling out jokes about bringing him back a souvenir from the mountain. The sleigh bells fade into the distance, and then silence. Just Yuri and the endless Russian winter. What's going through Yuri's mind as he watches those sleighs vanish into the tree line? Regret, definitely. These are expeditions you dream about your whole life. But also, relief. His knee is screaming just from standing here. The rational part of his brain knows he made the right choice. Still, watching your friends head into danger while you stay safe in civilization, that's a special kind of torture. He has no idea he'll spend the rest of his life grateful for that throbbing knee. Because here's what makes this moment so chilling in hindsight. Yuri Yudin just became the sole survivor of the Dyatlov Pass incident. A last-minute injury, a practical decision about wilderness safety, a few hours of knee pain. These mundane details just saved his life. While his 8 friends disappear into the forest, heading toward an appointment with something so terrifying it will puzzle investigators for decades, Yuri boards a bus back to civilization. Sometimes the smallest choices echo through history. The 8 remaining hikers settle into their sleighs for the journey deeper into the wilderness. The forest closes around them like a green tunnel. Snow-heavy branches arch overhead. The horse's breath steams in the brutal cold. And slowly, very slowly, they're leaving behind every trace of human civilization. No more buildings, no more roads, no more people. Just endless forest, distant mountains, and snow that crunches under the sleigh runners like broken glass. They're singing to keep their spirits up. They have no idea what's waiting. Meanwhile, Yuri begins his journey back to Yekaterinburg. The bus ride that should feel like failure instead feels like escape, though he doesn't understand why yet. His knee throbs with each pothole, but somehow he feels lighter with every mile. He stares out the window at the endless forest, thinking about his friends somewhere out there in that white vastness. He imagines them setting up camp, Igor consulting his compass, someone playing the mandolin. Normal expedition life. He has no idea he'll never see any of them alive again. What Yuri doesn't know, what he can't know, is that he just escaped something that will defy explanation for over 60 years. While he's riding back to safety, his 8 friends are heading toward an encounter so bizarre that investigators will eventually close the case, citing an unknown compelling force. A knee injury just saved him from becoming one of the most puzzling deaths in modern history. Sometimes fate disguises itself as bad luck. Sometimes the worst moment of your life is actually the best. The chapter closes with the frontier village of Vizhai, settling back into its winter routine. Smoke rises from chimneys, lumberjacks return from the forest. Life continues, but somewhere out there, 8 young people are sledding deeper into the wilderness, their laughter echoing off the snow-laden trees. They have 12 days left to live. 12 days before something will drive them from their tent in pure terror, sending them fleeing barefoot into the killing cold of Dead Mountain. But for now, they're just friends on an adventure, wading through white, the frozen forest. February 1st, 1959, deep in the northern Urals now. The expedition has been trekking for days through snow that comes up past their knees. Every step forward takes real effort. The birch and cedar trees stretch endlessly in every direction, their branches heavy with fresh powder. It's beautiful and completely unforgiving. Igor checks his compass again. They're making good time, but the snow keeps getting deeper. Behind him, someone starts humming a folk tune. The sound echoes strangely in all that white silence. Look at their photographs from this day. 9 young faces, rosy-cheeked from the cold, grinning at the camera. They're tired, but you can see the excitement in their eyes. This is what they trained for, what they dreamed about during those long nights studying engineering back in Sverdlovsk. The snow crunches under their skis with every stride. Dyatlov estimates they've covered maybe 8 miles since dawn. Not bad, considering they're basically breaking trail through virgin powder. The forest feels endless, pure, almost sacred in its silence. Here's what gets me about this part of their journey. They're actually having fun. I mean real fun, despite hauling 60-pound packs through snow that would exhaust most people in an hour. Around midday they stop for lunch, and someone pulls out the mandolin, right there in the middle of nowhere. Rustam starts playing, and suddenly they're all singing. Their voices carry across the empty forest. If you listen to the recordings they made, you can hear pure joy, no idea what's waiting for them up ahead. The terrain keeps changing. Rolling hills covered in birch give way to steeper slopes thick with evergreens. Ancient cedars that have been standing here for centuries, maybe longer. The snow gets deeper as they climb, 3 feet, 4 feet. Sometimes they sink in up to their waists. But here's the thing about experienced hikers. They know how to work as a team. They take turns breaking trail, rotating who leads every 30 minutes. Saves energy, keeps everyone fresh, smart planning, military precision almost. Their journal entries from this day are fascinating. Zina writes about the way sunlight filters through the snow-heavy branches, creating these cathedral-like spaces between the trees. Rustam sketches the landscape, trying to capture the endless white. Igor notes their coordinates, elevation changes, weather conditions, always the engineer, thinking systematically. But even his technical notes show wonder. The forest is magnificent, he writes. We are small specks moving through something timeless. He has no idea how prophetic those words will become. Around 3 in the afternoon, they hit their first real challenge. A slope so steep and snow-packed that their skis keep sliding backward. They have to remove the skis and climb on foot, kicking steps into the snow with their boots. It takes almost 2 hours to gain maybe 500 feet of elevation. Exhausting work, but watch them in the photos. They're laughing about it, helping each other up, making jokes about becoming human snowballs. Their camaraderie is genuinely beautiful and heartbreaking, knowing what's coming. The silence out here is unlike anything most people ever experience. Not just quiet, but complete absence of human sound. No cars, no airplanes, no distant city hum, just wind in the trees and the steady crunch 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 of their boots and ski poles. Sometimes one of them will shout just to hear their voice echo back from the hills. It's both exhilarating and slightly unnerving, like the forest is holding its breath, watching these 9 small figures make their way deeper into its heart. By late afternoon, the temperature starts dropping. Fast. What had been maybe 10 degrees below zero is now pushing 20 below. You can see their breath in thick clouds, icicles forming on their scarves, but they know how to handle cold, layer properly, keep moving, share body heat during breaks. These aren't tourists stumbling around unprepared. They're experienced winter hikers who've trained for conditions exactly like this. The cold is challenging, sure, but it's not life-threatening. Not yet. They're still in control. As the sun starts to set, they begin looking for a good campsite. Somewhere flat enough for the tent, protected from wind, close to trees they can cut for firewood. Igor scouts ahead while the others rest. The golden light filtering through the snow-covered branches creates this otherworldly beauty. Like being inside a snow globe, Zina takes photos of the sunset painting the snow orange and pink. These will be among the last photographs ever taken of the group alive. Though none of them know that, they find their spot in a small clearing surrounded by birch trees. Perfect natural windbreak. The snow here is only about 3 feet deep, instead of the 5-foot drifts they've been fighting all day. They work efficiently to set up camp. Some gather firewood, others level the snow for the tent. Rustam starts cooking dinner on their portable stove. Within an hour they have a proper base camp established. Warm tent, hot food, crackling fire just outside, everything an experienced winter camping group needs to stay safe and comfortable. This is where their humanity really shines through. After dinner, instead of immediately going to sleep, they sit around the fire telling stories, sharing memories from previous expeditions, planning future adventures. The mandolin comes out again, and they sing songs their parents taught them, old Russian folk songs about travel and friendship, and the beauty of their vast homeland. Their voices echo across the frozen forest. If you close your eyes and listen to their recordings, you can almost feel the warmth of that fire. What strikes me about this evening is how normal it all seems. Just 9 friends enjoying each other's company in one of the most beautiful places on earth. They're tired but satisfied, proud of the distance they covered, excited about reaching their destination. Igor reviews tomorrow's route by flashlight. They plan to push higher into the mountains, closer to their goal of Mount Torten. The name means don't go there in the local Mansi language. But they don't know that. And even if they did, eventually, one by one, they drift off to sleep. The fire burns down to glowing embers. Snow begins falling again. Gentle, steady flakes that will continue through the night. Their tent is warm and dry. They have food, fuel, proper gear, everything they need to safely continue their expedition tomorrow. In a few hours, they'll wake up, break camp, and push deeper into the mountains, toward the place that will become their grave. But for now, they sleep peacefully, dreaming of conquest and adventure. The forest settles into its ancient rhythm, snowflakes falling without sound, wind whispering through the evergreens. Somewhere in the distance, perhaps, the call of a night bird. The 9 hikers sleep on, unaware that they have just experienced their last truly peaceful night. Tomorrow they will break camp and continue north, toward Kholat Syakhl, Dead Mountain, where something waits that will transform their adventure into history's most haunting mystery. But that's still ahead of them. For now there is only the gentle silence of falling snow, the path less travelled, Kholat Syakhl. February 1st, 1959. The morning starts clear enough. Igor Dyatlov checks his compass, points toward the pass. Simple plan: cross the ridge, descend the other side, make camp in the forest. But the weather has other ideas. By noon the wind picks up. By afternoon it's howling. Snow starts falling sideways. Visibility drops to maybe 20 feet, then 10. The landmarks they're counting on, gone, swallowed up in white. This is where everything starts going wrong. You've got to understand, these aren't beginners. Igor's led expeditions before. They've studied the maps, memorized the route. But maps don't show you what a blizzard does to your sense of direction. What it's like when every snow-covered boulder looks exactly the same. When the wind's so loud you can't hear your teammate shouting 3 feet away. When your goggles fog up and ice forms on your eyelashes. Suddenly, expert navigation becomes educated guessing, and they're about to guess wrong. The planned route would take them northwest, through a saddle between peaks, safe passage, well-mapped territory. But the compass needle wavers in Igor's frozen hand. The wind's pushing them sideways with every step. Snow's coming down so thick it's like being inside a cloud. Rustam Slobodan pulls up beside Igor, has to lean in close to be heard over the gale. They're both squinting at landmarks that aren't there anymore. The mountain's playing tricks on them now. Here's what's happening to their internal compass. Stress hormones. When you're cold, tired, and disoriented, your brain starts making different decisions. Risk assessment goes out the window. You start second-guessing everything. Igor's usually calm leadership begins showing cracks. Zina Kolmogorova notices it first. The way he keeps checking and rechecking the map. The way his voice gets sharper when someone asks about the route. Fear's contagious in a group this tight. Once it starts spreading, the terrain's working against them too. What looks simple on paper turns into a maze of ridges and false peaks. Every time they think they've found the right path, another wall of rock and snow blocks their way. The topography here is confounding. Steep slopes that seem to lead somewhere but don't. Dead ends disguised as passages. And underneath all that fresh powder, the ground's unstable. Ice, hidden rocks, places where one wrong step could mean 100-foot slide down a mountainside. By mid-afternoon, they've made a critical navigation error. Instead of crossing the pass, they've veered south, towards something the local Mansi people call Kholat Syakhl, Dead Mountain. The name should tell you everything. It's not called that because nothing grows there, though nothing does. It's called that because weird things happen on this mountain. Animals avoid it. Hunters won't camp here. The Mansi have stories about this place, stories the 9 hikers don't know. The group's starting to fracture psychologically. Luda Dubina, usually the joker, goes quiet. Yuri Doroshenko keeps asking Igor if they're lost. Igor keeps saying no, but his voice doesn't carry the same confidence. Rustam's getting irritated with the slower hikers. Tobu Brignol starts falling behind, struggling with his skis in the deep powder. The mandolin that usually comes out during breaks stays packed. Nobody's in the mood for music. The mountains stealing their joy, piece by piece. What they don't realize, they're not just lost. They're climbing. The slope's so gradual at first, they don't notice. But every step forward is also a step up. Into thinner air, into colder temperatures, into more exposed terrain where the wind hits harder. The smart move would be to turn around, head back to the forest where they can make shelter. But they're experienced hikers. They've pushed through bad weather before. Pride's a dangerous thing in the mountains. The wind speed picks up dramatically as they gain elevation. We're talking 60 miles per hour now. Gusts that knock you sideways, that steal the breath from your lungs. Your body heat gets sucked away faster than you can generate it. Zena's losing feeling in her hands even with gloves on. Sasha Kolovatov's face mask freezes to his beard. They're burning through their energy reserves just fighting to stay upright. And they haven't even made camp yet. Here's where the disorientation becomes complete. The blowing snow creates whiteout conditions. No horizon line, no sense of up or down. It's like being inside a milk bottle. Every direction looks the same. The ski tracks they made an hour ago, blown over, invisible. The compass starts acting weird. This high up, something about magnetic interference. Or maybe Igor's just too cold to read it properly. Either way, they're navigating by guesswork now. The psychological pressure's mounting. When you can't see where you're going, when every step might be your last safe one, when the cold's seeping through your gear despite all your preparation, that's when rational thinking breaks down. Igor knows they need to find shelter soon. But where? Turn back now and they might wander in circles until hypothermia claims them. Push forward and, well, they don't know what's ahead. Dead Mountain keeps its secrets. The silence between wind gusts is the worst part. When the howling stops for a few seconds, you realize how isolated you are, how far from help, how small you are against this landscape. Georgy Krivonyshenko, usually the photographer, keeps his camera tucked away. Nothing to see anyway, just endless white in every direction. The mountains swallowed them whole, and somewhere in that silence you can almost feel it watching them, waiting. Their visible world shrinks to maybe 10 feet in any direction, just the immediate circle of churned snow around their skis. The person in front becomes a ghost, appearing and disappearing in the blowing powder. Communication breaks down to hand signals and shouted fragments. This way, wait, can't see. The mountains isolating them even from each other. 9 people traveling together, but each one alone inside their own struggle against the cold and confusion. As darkness starts creeping in, Igor makes the call. They'll have to camp here, on the exposed slope. Not ideal, but they're out of options. The forest somewhere below them, but finding it in these conditions would be suicide, so they start digging into the snow, fighting the wind for every shovel. 9 young people preparing to spend the night on Dead Mountain. They have no idea this will be their last camp together, no idea what's waiting for them in the darkness ahead. In the eye of the storm, a fateful camp. February 1st, 1959, 4 in the afternoon. The light's already bleeding out of the sky, and Igor Dyatlov finally admits what everyone's been thinking. They're lost. Not just a little off course, lost. They should be crossing the pass by now, setting up camp in the sheltered valley beyond. Instead, they're halfway up the wrong mountain. Kholat Syakhl, Dead Mountain. The Mansi won't even hunt here. And the wind, God, the wind is picking up. This is the moment. The decision that will haunt investigators for 60 years. Dyatlov looks down the slope toward the tree line, maybe half a mile away. Dark spruce and birch offering real shelter from what's coming. Any sensible mountaineer would retreat, set up camp in the forest, wait out the storm. But Dyatlov doesn't retreat. He looks at his exhausted team, checks his watch, calculates something in his head. Then he makes the call. They're camping here, on the exposed ridge. The decision defies every rule of winter survival. You never camp on exposed high ground. Never. Especially not with weather moving in. The wind's already hitting 30 miles per hour and building. Snow starting to whip horizontally across the slope. Temperature dropping fast. But Dyatlov's thinking about their schedule, about earning their Category 3 certification, about proving something, maybe to the university, maybe to himself. The forest means admitting defeat, and Igor Dyatlov doesn't admit defeat easily. Look at their faces in the photographs. Zena Kolmogorova adjusting her wool cap against the wind. Rustam Slobodin checking his compass one more time. They trust their leader completely. These aren't beginners. They're experienced winter hikers who've earned their Category 2 certifications. If Dyatlov says they camp here, they camp here. but you can see it in their eyes. The uncertainty, the first whisper of something that might be fear. The mountain doesn't care about their credentials. There's this weird moment of calm, like the mountain's holding its breath. The wind dies down just enough for normal conversation. Someone makes a joke about the weather forecast. It actually gets a laugh. Ludmila Dubinina starts humming under her breath. That mandolin's still strapped to someone's pack, waiting for tonight's music around the camp. For just a few minutes it feels manageable, like they've made a bold choice, not a fatal one. The calm before the storm. But the wind comes back, harder now. 60 miles per hour gusts that knock people sideways. The kind of wind that gets inside your head, makes you doubt yourself, makes experienced hikers start making mistakes. It's not just the physical force, it's the sound. This constant howling that drowns out thought, makes communication nearly impossible. You can see it starting to fray their composure, the way they're moving. More urgent now, more careful, more afraid. Darkness is coming fast. In the Urals in February, you've got maybe an hour of useful light left, and setting up camp in these conditions, it's going to take everything they've got. The wind keeps grabbing their equipment. Tent stakes won't hold in the wind-packed snow. Every task becomes a battle, and underneath it all, this growing realization, they're not just camping on Dead Mountain, they're trapped on it. The weather's closing in, no going back now. You can feel the psychological weight settling over them. The knowledge that they've crossed some invisible line, made a choice they can't unmake. Georgy Krivonyshenko keeps checking the horizon like he's looking for an escape route that isn't there. Sasha Kolovatov's gone quiet, which isn't like him at all. Even the mandolin stays silent now. The mountain's got them, and somewhere deep in their guts they know it. But they keep working. There's no discussion about changing course. No committee meeting about whether this was the right call. In Soviet hiking culture, the leader's decision is final. And Dyatlov, he's doubled down. Started giving orders about tent placement like this was always the plan. Like camping on an exposed ridge in a building storm was just another day in the mountains. But his voice carries differently now. Sharper, more urgent. The voice of someone fighting doubt. They start digging. 4 feet down through wind-packed snow, trying to create some kind of shelter from the wind. Their shovels ring against ice. Every scoop gets blown back in their faces. Miserable work that leaves them exhausted before they even set up the tent. But it's work. Something to focus on besides the growing dread in their stomachs. Besides the realization that they're now committed to spending the night in hell. The mountain doesn't care about their expertise. Doesn't care about their plans or their schedules or their desperate attempt to carve out a shelter. Kholat Syakhl has been here for millions of years. It's seen storms that would terrify veteran mountaineers. Seen hunters and travelers make fatal decisions. The Mansi have stories about this place, stories they don't tell outsiders, stories about why you don't camp on Dead Mountain, stories the 9 hikers never heard. This decision, this moment, it ripples forward through time like a stone dropped in dark water. In 3 weeks, search parties will find their tent here, slashed open from the inside, abandoned in panic, and they'll ask the same question everyone's been asking for 60 years. Why didn't they retreat to the forest? Why camp on this god-forsaken ridge? Why make the choice that doomed them all? But standing here, watching the storm build, maybe we understand. The last light bleeds out of the sky. Temperatures dropping fast now, probably 15 below and falling. The wind's turned vicious, constant, unrelenting, and 9 young people are about to spend what might be their last night alive in a tent that's already struggling against the storm. They don't know that yet. They're still focused on the work, still believing in their leader, still thinking they'll laugh about this someday. But the mountain knows. Kholat Syakhl has accepted their choice, accepted them, and as the wind picks up to a full scream and the snow starts driving horizontal across the ridge, as they finally get their tent pitched in the shallow depression they've carved from the ice, the real test begins. The test that will either prove Dyatlov right or destroy them all. The night is just beginning, and something's coming. Burrows in the blizzard, constructs of survival. February 1st, evening. The wind screams across Kholat Syakhl at 60 miles per hour. 9 young hikers stand on an exposed slope. Realizing their mistake, they should be in the forest below, sheltered, safe, but darkness is falling fast, and descending now means navigating unknown terrain in whiteout conditions. Igor Dyatlov makes the call. They'll camp here, on Dead Mountain itself. The decision that seals their fate begins with the scrape of metal against packed snow. The shovels bite into snow that's been compressed by weeks of wind, hard as concrete in places. They take turns, 20 scoops each before passing the tool to the next person. Steam rises from their faces. Even in this cold, the work makes them sweat. Rustam Slobodan jokes about Soviet engineering techniques. The others laugh, but you can hear the edge in their voices. They all know this isn't how winter camping is supposed to work. But they're committed now. 4 feet down. That's the plan. Deep enough to break the wind's fury, shallow enough that they won't exhaust themselves digging. But the snow fights them. Layers of ice mixed with powder. Some sections crumble, others resist like frozen earth. Lyudmyla's hands are already numb through her mittens. She switches with Zina every few minutes. The girls work as hard as the boys. Nobody gets to rest while others suffer. That's how their group has always operated. Shared burden, shared risk. The wind carries voices away before they can be heard. They develop hand signals, point where to dig, gesture when someone needs a break. Kolovatov organizes the snow removal, creating a system: dig, load, pass, dump, dig, load, pass, dump. Mechanical rhythm in chaos. Their headlamps create a bubble of yellow light in the howling darkness. Beyond that circle, the mountain disappears into white void. They might as well be digging on the moon, isolated, vulnerable, but still together. The depression takes shape slowly, rectangular, just large enough for their communal tent. The sides aren't perfectly straight, but they don't need to be. This isn't architecture, it's survival engineering. Rough edges, practical solutions. Thibaut Brignoles tests the depth with his ski pole. Still not quite 4 feet. They keep digging. The physical work helps fight the cold, but it's burning energy they'll need later. Energy they might not be able to replace. Every calorie matters now. Snow stings their faces like thrown sand. The wind shifts direction constantly, finding every gap in their clothing. Krivonishenko's beard is solid white with ice. His breath freezes before it leaves his mouth. They're working in conditions that would shut down modern construction sites. -40 with wind chill. Exposed skin frostbites in minutes. But they can't stop, can't slow down. The alternative is spending the night in the open, and that would mean certain death for all 9. Doroshenko stumbles, exhaustion making him clumsy. The others help him up without comment. They've been hiking hard for days. Bodies running on reserves now. Sleep deprived, dehydrated, despite the snow they melt for water. But complaining won't make the wind stop or the temperature rise. So they dig and joke when they can, and check on each other constantly. 9 individuals becoming a single organism focused on shelter, on surviving until morning, on seeing home again. The hollow reaches regulation depth. 4 feet down, 10 feet long, 8 feet wide. Rough dimensions, but it'll work. The wind noise drops noticeably in the depression. Not silent, but manageable. They can hear each other speak without shouting. Small victory. Dyatlov inspects their work with a headlamp, nods approval. It's not perfect, but it's adequate. In mountaineering, adequate often means the difference between life and death. They've bought themselves a chance to survive the night. Tent setup in these conditions requires all 9 working together. The canvas whips like a living thing, trying to escape their grip. They wrestle it into position, stakes driven into the packed snow floor, guy lines stretched tight. The familiar orange glow of their shelter takes shape in the depression. Home for the night. Temporary, fragile, but theirs. Inside, they'll be warm, safe. They've done this dozens of times before. Routine procedures, but tonight feels different. Tonight carries weight. Final preparations happen fast. Sleeping bags arranged inside. Cook stove set up for dinner. Personal gear organized the way experienced campers do automatically. Everything has its place, easy to find in darkness. The mandolin goes in carefully, protected from cold. Their one luxury item, music for morale. They'll need entertainment during the long night ahead. Stories, songs, anything to keep spirits up while the mountain tries to break them. Civilization packed into canvas and down. From inside the tent, the shelter feels solid. Canvas walls block most of the wind noise. The hollow they've dug creates a pocket of relative calm. Sleeping bags spread across the floor, 9 spaces in tight formation. Body heat will keep them warm enough. They've calculated the math. Shared resources, shared warmth. The engineering students' approach to survival. Logic and preparation. They've done everything right, followed all the rules, taken every precaution, and yet, something feels wrong. The last natural light fades from the Ural sky, deep purple giving way to black. Stars disappear behind blowing snow. Their headlamps create the only illumination for miles. 9 points of light on an endless mountain. The wind hasn't decreased. If anything, it's gotten stronger. 60-mile-per-hour gusts rock the tent, but the shelter holds. Their engineering holds. They've created order from chaos, built safety from nothing but snow and determination. For now, that's enough. Dinner preparations begin inside the warm tent. Canned meat, dried bread, hot tea from melted snow. Simple food that tastes perfect after a day of hard work in brutal cold. They're tired but satisfied. Problem identified, problem solved. The Soviet way. Their journals from this evening will record successful shelter construction, team cooperation, morale remaining high despite difficult conditions, everything proceeding according to plan. If they could see the future, would they change anything? Or is fate already written in the wind? Night settles fully over Dead Mountain. 9 young people arrange themselves for sleep in their carefully constructed shelter, their tracks from the day's work already filling with fresh snow. The tent glows faintly orange from within, last sign of human presence on the empty mountainside. Inside, they're writing final journal entries, sharing quiet conversation, preparing for rest. They believe they're safe now, protected, but somewhere in the howling darkness outside, something waits, something that will change everything. Calm and chaos, the Last Supper. Inside their makeshift shelter, 9 friends gather for what will become their final meal together. The tent fabric snaps and rustles against 60-mile-per-hour winds, but inside there's warmth, relative safety. Igor Dyatlov unpacks the evening rations while Zina Kolmogorova arranges personal items with practiced efficiency. The mandolin rests against someone's pack, silent for now. Journals lie open beside sleeping bags. Everything meticulously organized, everything perfectly normal. Outside, Dead Mountain groans under the assault of Arctic wind. But here in this small orange sanctuary, they're just young people sharing dinner together. The smell of canned meat and dried bread fills the cramped space. Rustam Slobodin writes in his journal, documenting their progress with meticulous detail. The pen scratches against paper, a sound almost lost beneath the wind's howl. Lutta Dubina sorts through personal belongings, her movements careful and deliberate. Each item has its place, each person has their routine. There's something deeply human about this moment, the way people create order in chaos, find comfort in small rituals, even when surrounded by wilderness that wants to kill them. They don't know they're living their final conscious hour. The tent sways but holds. 4 feet of snow excavated by hand surrounds their hollow, creating walls against the relentless Ural wind. Inside, body heat and shared breath warm the air to almost bearable temperatures. Yura Krivonishenko jokes with Sasha Kolovatov about something trivial, their laughter cutting through the storm's voice. This is what experienced hikers do. They normalize the extreme, make the life-threatening feel routine. The camera sits ready to document tomorrow's summit attempt. Maps are folded and stowed, everything prepared for a morning that will never come. Think about how normal this scene looks. 9 people sharing a meal, preparing for sleep, going through the mundane rituals of expedition life. Georgy Krivonishenko adjusts his sleeping bag. Thibaut Brignoles organizes his pack for tomorrow's climb. Someone mentions the cold, someone else the wind, the same conversations that happen in mountain camps everywhere. But there's something else here, something none of them can sense yet. A tension building outside their fragile shelter. The mountain itself seems to be gathering its strength, preparing to claim them in the most mysterious way imaginable. The evening routine continues with practiced efficiency. Socks are changed, boots are arranged just so, personal items are secured against the tent's movement. Zena writes briefly in her diary, her handwriting steady despite the cold making her fingers stiff. The group shares stories, quiet conversation that bonds them closer in the isolation. They've done this together for weeks now, this careful orchestration of survival. Each person knows their role, their responsibilities. What they don't know is that something is watching from the darkness beyond their thin canvas walls, something that defies explanation. Igor Dyatlov, expedition leader, makes final notes about their position and tomorrow's planned route to Autortan's summit. His leadership has brought them this far safely through brutal conditions. The pen moves across paper with the confidence of someone who understands mountains, weather, risk management. He's calculated everything: food supplies, weather windows, emergency procedures. What he can't calculate is the impossible choice that waits in the darkness ahead. Within hours, he'll make a decision that will baffle investigators for decades. He'll order them to cut their way out of this tent and flee into subzero death. The wind outside intensifies. Fabric strains against guy lines and tent poles, creating a rhythm like a drumbeat against the night. But inside, there's this bubble of civilization, human voices, the rustle of movement, the small sounds of people caring for themselves and each other. Lurja passes around the last of their hot tea. Rustam shares a piece of chocolate he's been saving. These tiny acts of kindness matter more in conditions like this. They're what separate humans from the brutal mathematics of survival. They're also what makes what happens next so tragically incomprehensible. Look at their faces in this moment if you could. Tired but content. Accomplished. They've made it this far against serious odds, nearly to their goal of reaching Mount Autortan. Young faces lit by whatever small light they have, probably a flashlight or candle, shadows dancing on orange canvas. The expressions of people who trust each other completely, who've tested themselves against nature and found they're strong enough. In a few hours, these same faces will be twisted with terror as they slash through this very tent wall with knives and run screaming into certain death. The mundane details matter because they make what follows so much more disturbing. Toothbrushes are used. Medications are taken. Someone mentions being excited about tomorrow's summit push. The mandolin gets tuned, but perhaps not played. The music would be lost in the wind anyway. Personal letters are written to families back home, never to be sent. Photographs are loaded into cameras for tomorrow's documentation. Every preparation for a future that will arrive in the form of something so terrifying it will drive experienced mountaineers into the arms of hypothermia rather than face it. Outside, the temperature drops below -30 Fahrenheit. Inside, they're warm enough to remove outer layers, to write, to organize, to think about tomorrow. The contrast is everything. 3 feet away lies instant death. Here lies safety, companionship, shared purpose. The tent represents civilization's thinnest possible boundary against the void, canvas and goodwill against the universe's indifference. In other expeditions, this boundary holds. People sleep safely and wake to climb mountains. But tonight, something waits in the darkness that makes even this minimal safety unbearable to maintain. The final conversations begin winding down. Yawns interrupt sentences. Someone mentions being tired from the day's difficult travel through deep snow. Sleeping bags are unrolled and arranged. The daily expedition is nearly complete, another successful day of progress toward their goal. But there's something else happening too, something none of them can detect. The mountain itself seems to be listening. The wind carries sounds that might not be natural. The darkness beyond their shelter presses closer than usual. Whatever claims them tonight is already positioning itself, already calculating its approach through the howling Arctic darkness. As they prepare for sleep, each person settles into their personal space within the shared shelter. Heads rest on improvised pillows, bodies arrange themselves for warmth and comfort in sleeping bags designed for exactly these conditions. The tent becomes a cocoon of human presence on an otherwise lifeless mountainside. Breathing slows, conversation fades to whispers, then silence except for the wind. This is the last moment of peace they'll ever know. Within hours, something will terrify them so completely that they'll choose death by freezing over remaining in this warm, safe space. The final entry is written in someone's journal. The last photograph is organized in someone's pack. Personal effects are arranged with the care of people who plan to use them again tomorrow. Watches are wound, plans are finalized. The expedition continues its methodical progression toward success. Everything normal, everything as it should be. But outside, in the screaming wind and absolute darkness of the Ural winter, something approaches their tent, something that will prove more terrifying than hypothermia, avalanche, or any natural force these experienced hikers have ever encountered in their years of mountain travel. the last conscious moments before sleep settle over the tent. 9 young people who trust each other completely, who've overcome every challenge the mountains have thrown at them, drift toward dreams of tomorrow's summit. Their breathing creates small clouds in the cold air. Bodies relax into hard-earned rest. The tent holds steady against the wind, guy lines singing in the gale. In a few hours, these same people will be so terrified they'll slice through this shelter with knives and run nearly naked into certain death. What waits in the darkness of Dead Mountain remains the greatest mystery in mountaineering history. Into the Abyss, Fatal Flight, February 2nd, 1959, past midnight on Dead Mountain. Inside that orange tent, 9 young people sleep in their familiar formation, Zina near the entrance, Igor beside her, Rustam curled against the cold wall. The wind screams outside at 60 miles per hour, but they've weathered worse. The tent holds, their equipment organized perfectly, skis propped outside, boots arranged just so. This is routine now, after weeks on the mountain. But in these next few minutes, something shatters that routine forever. Picture the moment before. Luda's diary tucked under her sleeping bag. Nicholas's camera with its final photographs. The mandolin leaning against a pack. Someone's watch ticking in the darkness. Maybe one of them stirs, feels the tent fabric shifting strangely. Maybe that's when it starts, the thing that makes experienced mountaineers forget everything they know about survival, because what happens next goes against every instinct they've trained for years. Every rule that keeps you alive in the wilderness gets abandoned in pure terror. Whatever hits them, it happens fast. Too fast for boots, too fast for coats, too fast for anything except the most primal response. Run. Get out. Now. But here's what haunts investigators. They don't just panic and bolt through the tent entrance. No, they grab knives, start cutting, slash after slash through the fabric from inside, creating their own exit. Think about that for a second. What makes 9 people simultaneously decide the tent entrance isn't good enough? What are they running from that badly? The cuts tell their own story. Long, deliberate slashes, not random panic cuts. Someone took the time to create an exit, big enough for people to escape through. But why? The tent door was right there, unlocked, easy to open. Instead, they destroy their only shelter on purpose, their home for the night, their protection against winds that can kill you in minutes. They slash it apart like it's become a trap, like staying inside means something worse than the brutal cold outside. And then they run into the night, into that howling wind, into temperatures that will freeze exposed skin in minutes. Zina in her underwear, Igor in a torn shirt, Rustam barefoot. This isn't stumbling around confused. The footprints show purpose, direction. They're heading downhill toward the forest, fast, in a line, like they know exactly where they're going, like they've planned this escape route. But from what? What drives experienced hikers to choose certain death by exposure over staying in their tent? Behind them, everything stays perfectly organized. Boots lined up neatly, coats folded, food supplies untouched, money still in wallets, cameras ready for morning shots they'll never take. The contrast is jarring. Outside, pure panic. Inside, everything exactly where it should be, like they were interrupted during normal evening routine. Maybe someone was writing in their journal. Maybe others were already asleep. Then something happens that turns orderly camp life into desperate flight without changing a single arranged item. These aren't amateur hikers. This is Igor Dyatlov, who's led expeditions through Siberian wilderness since he was 15. Zina Kolmogorova, skilled enough to join elite climbing clubs. Rustem Slobodin, who knows hypothermia will kill you in underwear at these temperatures. They've survived blizzards before, equipment failures, getting lost. They know the rules. The first rule is never abandon your shelter, but something overwhelms their training completely, makes them choose what they know will kill them over staying where they are. Later, investigators will theorize about katabatic winds creating infrasound, frequencies below human hearing that can trigger panic attacks, ultrasonic pressure waves bouncing off the mountain slope, sound weapons being tested by the military, natural phenomena that mess with your inner ear, your balance, your reasoning. Maybe that's what hits them, an invisible force that bypasses rational thought entirely, makes staying in that tent feel impossible. But even then, cutting their way out, That seems like conscious decision-making under pressure. The footprint trail begins immediately outside the slashed tent. 9 sets, clear in the snow, heading straight downhill, no wandering, no hesitation, no stopping to grab boots from the neat line beside the entrance. Just purposeful movement toward the forest below. The spacing between prints shows they're moving fast, not running exactly, but urgent walking, in bare feet, through snow, at -40 degrees. Following this trail becomes a map of their final hour, each step deeper into the wilderness, further from any chance of survival. Some of them manage to grab minimal clothing, a torn jacket here, one boot there, but mostly they flee in what they wore to sleep. Underwear, thin shirts, maybe socks, in conditions where properly dressed people struggle to survive more than an hour outside. It's like watching someone run from a house fire in their pajamas, except there's no fire, no avalanche, no obvious threat at all. Just 9 people convinced that staying in their warm, dry shelter means something worse than freezing to death naked in the snow. The wind is brutal that night. 60-mile-per-hour gusts, enough to knock you over if you're not careful. But they keep moving downhill, through the screaming air. The temperature hovers around -13 Fahrenheit. That's cold enough to freeze exposed skin in 15 minutes. In underwear, you're talking about maybe 30 minutes before hypothermia starts shutting down your brain. Maybe an hour before you're unconscious. They know this. They've studied it. They've trained for it. And they choose it anyway, over whatever's in that tent. By morning, the wind has covered most of the footprints. Snow drifts over the slashed tent. Their camp becomes a white mound on the mountainside. Silent. Abandoned. The skis still propped outside like question marks. Inside, journals with the final entry dated February 1st. Normal expedition notes about weather and route planning. Nothing about fear. Nothing about strange sounds or lights or anything wrong. Just routine observations. Then, this explosion of terror that leaves 9 people scattered dead across Dead Mountain. This moment, this slash through tent fabric, becomes the central mystery of the entire Dyatlov Pass incident. Everything else flows from this decision. The deaths, the strange injuries, the radiation traces, the government secrecy, all of it starts here, with 9 people choosing certain death over staying inside their shelter. Investigators will spend decades trying to understand what happened in those few minutes past midnight. What force, natural or otherwise, could override the survival instincts of experienced mountaineers so completely? The tent holds their final mystery, their last normal moment before everything changes. Inside, you can still see the careful organization, the respect for equipment that keeps you alive in the wilderness. Outside, the violence of their escape, the slashed fabric flapping in the wind like a wound, and stretching downhill, the footprint trail that leads to 5 bodies near a cedar tree, 4 more in a snow den, and decades of questions that grow deeper with every investigation. What drove them into the abyss on Dead Mountain? The silence echoes. Search begins. February 12, 1959. The promised telegram never arrives. At Ural Polytechnic Institute, administrators check and recheck the telegraph office. Nothing. Igor Dyatlov had been clear about the schedule. They'd send word by the 12th, maybe the 15th at the latest, if weather delayed them. But silence stretches like the winter nights, and by February 15th, that silence starts feeling wrong, really wrong. The expedition office grows tense. Phone calls begin, quiet conversations in hallways. Still, nobody wants to panic yet. February 16th. The families start calling. Mrs. Dyatlova phones the institute twice. Yuri Yudin, the lone survivor who turned back, paces his dorm room wondering if his friends hit unexpected weather. Maybe they're holed up somewhere, waiting out a storm. That's what experienced hikers do, right? Wait it out. But he knows Igor's planning, knows how methodical his friend was about schedules. A day late, maybe. 3 days late, 4 days. The knot in Yudin's stomach grows heavier with each passing hour. February 17th. Professor Oleg Yemelyanov, who signed off on the expedition route, stares at the map spread across his desk. His finger traces their planned path. Vizhai, then north through the pass. Standard route. Good weather window when they left. These weren't novice hikers. Igor had completed multiple Category 3 expeditions. Zinaida Kolmogorova was an experienced mountaineer. Something's wrong. Really wrong. But what? Equipment failure? Injury? The Uralins in winter don't forgive mistakes. Yemelyanov reaches for the phone. Time to make some calls. February 18th. The decision crystallizes during a tense meeting at the Institute. Dean of the Faculty of Radio Engineering makes it official if no word comes by February 20th. They're organizing a search. The liability alone is staggering. 9 students under university expedition approval. But beyond bureaucracy, these are their kids. Bright engineering students with futures ahead of them. The meeting breaks up with grim faces and assignment of responsibilities. Someone needs to contact the families. Someone needs to call the authorities. Time is running out. February 19th. Word spreads through the student community. Volunteers step forward immediately. Fellow hikers who know the Urals. Radio club members who understand search coordination. The response is overwhelming and terrifying. Because when experienced mountaineers volunteer for winter search operations, they understand what they might find, or might not find. The northern Urals in February can swallow people completely. Avalanches, whiteouts, crevasses hidden under fresh snow. The volunteers know this. They come anyway. Friendship demands it. February 20th. The search becomes official. Local authorities coordinate with the Institute. Maps spread across tables in the emergency coordination room. Weather reports analyzed and reanalyzed. The temperature's been brutal, -25 Fahrenheit, sometimes colder. Winds gusting to 60 miles per hour. Visibility near zero during storms. If the team got caught in weather like that, well, the searchers try not to think about it. Focus on the grid search patterns. Focus on the mission. Hope they're just late. The search parties assemble in Ivdel, the last significant town before wilderness. Student volunteers mix with local guides who know every ridge and valley. Military personnel arrive from nearby installations. This is big enough now to warrant serious resources. Helicopters when weather permits. Ground teams with specialized equipment. Radio operators. Medical personnel, though nobody talks about why they might be needed. The atmosphere is professional, focused. Underneath runs a current of deep worry that nobody wants to acknowledge. Equipment checks become rituals of nervous energy. Radios tested and retested. Emergency medical supplies inventoried. Avalanche probes counted. Snow shovels sharpened. Each searcher knows their survival depends on this gear, and somewhere out there 9 people might be depending on them. The irony isn't lost on anyone. They're heading into the same conditions that may have claimed their friends. Same mountains, same brutal winter, same indifferent wilderness that doesn't distinguish between searcher and victim. February 21st. Weather grounds the helicopters. Visibility drops to 20 yards in blowing snow. Ground teams push forward anyway, because waiting means death if anyone's still alive out there. The search grid focuses on the planned route, Visay north through the pass toward Mount Otorten. They'd follow the same path, checking every possible shelter, every depression where a tent might be pitched, every stand of trees that could provide windbreak. Methodical, systematic, increasingly desperate. The first sweep finds nothing, absolutely nothing. No sign of passage, no abandoned equipment, no tent. The snow's been falling for weeks, covering tracks, filling in any trace of 9 people and their gear. It's like they vanished completely after leaving Visage. Some searchers wonder if they changed routes, headed somewhere else entirely. But Igor Dyatlov wasn't impulsive. He followed plans, filed proper route descriptions. The team should be here somewhere. Should be. The word carries less weight each day. February 23rd. Search area expands. Maybe they took a different route to the pass. Maybe weather forced them off course. Teams spread out across ridges and valleys that never saw human footprints. The mountains feel endless in winter white. Each depression could hide a campsite. Each stand of trees could shelter survivors or bodies. The searchers push deeper into wilderness. Radio check-ins every hour, their own survival margin shrinking as they range farther from base camps. The psychology shifts among search teams. Initial optimism, finding cold but living hikers, sheltering somewhere, fades into grimmer calculations. 2 weeks in this weather, sub-zero temperatures every night. Even with proper shelter and full supplies, survival would be touch and go. And they haven't found evidence of proper shelter, haven't found any evidence at all. Conversations around evening campfires grow quieter. Radio reports become more terse. Everyone knows what they're probably looking for now. February 25th. Morale wavers despite professional determination. Families wait for news that doesn't come. Search coordinators stare at maps marked with negative results. Red X's spreading across the grid like a disease. Weather reports promise more snow, more wind, more of the conditions that have already lasted too long. Some volunteers wonder if they're searching for ghosts. Others push harder, driven by the desperate mathematics of survival. Someone might still be alive. Someone might be waiting for rescue. February 26th dawns clear for the first time in days. Helicopter engines warm up at the staging area. Ground teams prepare for what feels like the make-or-break push. If they don't find anything today, well, nobody wants to finish that thought. The searchers check their equipment one final time, adjust their route assignments, and head into the mountains carrying hope that feels heavier than their packs. They don't know it yet, but today the wilderness finally gives up its first secret. Marks in the snow tent discovered. February 26th, 1959. The search team crests the ridge and stops dead. There, about 300 yards down the slope, something orange against all that white. Boris Slobtsov squints through the wind-driven snow. That's it. That's their tent. But something's wrong with the shape. It's collapsed, half buried, like it's been there for weeks. The silence up here is absolute. No wind now. Just the crunch of their boots as they approach what should have been a simple rescue. From a distance, it looks almost peaceful, like the hikers just made camp and went for a walk. The orange fabric bright against the snow, barely visible above the drift that's formed around it. But as the searchers get closer, details emerge that make no sense. The tent isn't standing, it's flattened, and there's something dark slashed across the side facing them. Cut marks, deep ones, from the inside. Someone took a knife to this tent and tore it open from within. The first thing Slobtsov notices are the footprints. Faint impressions in the snow leading away from the tent, down toward the forest line a mile below. But here's what gets him. These aren't boot prints. They're bare feet. Socks maybe, some wearing just one felt boot. The prints head straight downhill. No wandering, no hesitation, like people running from something. In -20-degree weather, without their boots, what could make experienced hikers abandon their shelter and flee into the frozen night? The tent opening faces uphill, away from the wind. Smart placement. These weren't amateurs. But when Slobtsov peers inside through the torn fabric, his breath catches. Everything's still there. Boots lined up neatly, coats hanging from the support poles, backpacks arranged along the walls like they always were. The mandolin case sits where someone left it, undisturbed. This wasn't a robbery. This wasn't an attack from outside. Whatever happened here, it came from within the tent itself. The inside tells a story the outside can't. 9 sleeping bags arranged with military precision, personal belongings sorted into neat piles, Rustam's diary open to February 1st, his pen still lying beside it. Someone had been writing when what? The medical kit sits unopened, food rations stacked and labelled, everything organised like they planned to return in an hour. But the cuts in the tent fabric, those tell a different story. Desperate slashes, emergency exit cuts, terror. Slobtsov counts the sleeping bags, 9, but he also counts the boots left behind. 18 boots. They all ran barefoot, in the worst weather conditions imaginable. His team photographs everything before disturbing the scene. The wind has died completely now, creating an eerie silence that feels wrong somehow, like the mountain itself is holding its breath. The camera clicks echo across the empty slope, each photo capturing evidence of something that defies logical explanation. What strikes the searchers most is the contrast. Outside, chaos, torn fabric whipping in the wind, snow drifting through the gashes, the tent structure partially collapsed. But inside, order, purpose. Like a photograph of normal expedition life suddenly interrupted by panic. Someone had folded their spare clothes. Someone had carefully rationed the food. Someone had been maintaining their equipment, right up until the moment they grabbed knives and started cutting their way out. The investigators later count 11 distinct slash marks in the tent fabric. 11 cuts made with knives and maybe an ice axe, all from inside the tent, the fabric curling outward where the blades exited. This wasn't one person cutting frantically. This was multiple people, all cutting at once, all desperate to get out. But out of what? The tent was their protection against the elements, their only barrier between life and death on this exposed mountainside. The footprint trail tells its own grim story. At first, 9 distinct sets of tracks heading downhill. The snow has filled them partially, but the shapes are still clear, some walking, some running. The trail stays together for about 50 yards, then begins to separate. Some prints veer left toward a cluster of cedar trees. Others continue straight down the slope, all of them getting fainter as the wind and new snow slowly erase the last evidence of their desperate flight. What the search team doesn't find haunts them as much as what they do. No signs of struggle outside the tent, no evidence of other people, no animal tracks, no avalanche debris. The campsite shows no disturbance except for the slashed tent itself. Even the skis are still propped neatly in the snow where the team left them. Whatever drove 9 experienced mountaineers into the night, it left no trace except terror, carved in orange fabric and footprints fading in the wind. Inside Igor's backpack, they find his camera. 31 photographs already taken, documenting the final days of the expedition. Happy faces around campfires, the team building snow walls, someone playing the mandolin while others sing. The last photo shows the tent being pitched here on this slope, everyone working together in the fading light. Normal expedition life, nothing that explains why. Hours later they would slash their way out and run to their deaths. The weather conditions that night were brutal. -20 Celsius, wind gusts up to 60 miles per hour. In conditions like that, leaving the tent meant certain death within hours. Every experienced hiker knows this. The Dyatlov group knew this. They had the skills, the equipment, the experience to survive almost anything the mountains could throw at them, except whatever happened inside that tent on February 2nd. Whatever made staying inside seem more dangerous than fleeing into the frozen darkness. As the search team documents the scene, snow begins falling again, fresh flakes settling on the torn tent fabric, filling in the remaining footprints, slowly erasing the physical evidence of that terrible night. Within hours, the pristine white will cover everything again, the mountain reclaiming its secrets. But the photographs will preserve this moment, the discovery that transforms a missing persons case into something far more mysterious, something that will haunt investigators for decades. The tent discovery raises more questions than it answers. If they cut their way out from inside, what were they running from? Why didn't they grab boots, coats, survival gear? Why did experienced mountaineers make choices that guaranteed death by exposure? The neatly organized belongings suggest they planned to return. The slashed fabric suggests they thought they never could. 2 contradictory stories told by the same small orange tent, sitting alone in the vastness of dead mountain, keeping its secrets. Grim recollections. Discovery in the forest. February 27th, 1959. The search party follows those haunting footprints for over a mile downhill from the tent. Bare feet and socked feet pressed into snow that's now weeks old. The trail leads them through sparse birch and pine toward the forest edge. And there's something dark against the white. 2 shapes near a massive cedar tree. The searchers stop. Nobody wants to get closer. They already know what they're looking at. But knowing and seeing are different things entirely. The cedar tree stands like a monument to desperation. Thick trunk, maybe 4 feet across, branches broken off up to 15 feet high, snapped clean. Someone climbed this tree in the dark, in subzero cold, with bare hands and feet. The broken branches lie scattered in the snow around the base like wooden bones. And beside this tree, the first body, Yuri Krivonishenko, 23 years old, engineering student, lies on his back in just underwear. His hands tell a story nobody wants to read. His fingers are burned, not frostbite burns, actual fire burns, raw flesh where he grabbed burning branches with his bare hands. The investigators stare at this in silence. You don't grab fire unless you're dying from cold, unless fire is the only thing between you and freezing to death. The desperation in those burned palms, it hits you in the chest. This wasn't someone making poor choices. This was someone fighting for every last second of life, and losing that fight in the cruelest possible way. 20 feet away, the second body, Yuri Doroshenko, also 23, also in underwear, also with burned hands. The 2 Yuris, They died together trying to build a fire they couldn't maintain. Scattered around them are the pathetic remains of their final effort. Charred twigs, blackened bits of bark, ashes mixed with snow, not enough fuel, not enough time, not enough clothes to survive what was happening to them. The cold had already won before they even started that fire. The investigators circle the scene like they're walking through a nightmare, because that's what this is. 2 healthy young men died here, wearing almost nothing, in temperatures that would kill exposed skin in minutes. Their bodies tell the timeline of hypothermia. First the shivering stops, then confusion sets in, then the paradoxical undressing, where freezing people feel hot and strip off their remaining clothes. Both Yuris show signs of this final stage. They undressed themselves to die. Their minds betrayed them at the end. But here's what haunts the investigators. These weren't panicked people who ran into the forest unprepared. The fire pit shows organization. They gathered tinder. They arranged kindling properly. They knew what they were doing. These were experienced hikers trying to survive with the skills they had. And it wasn't enough. Whatever drove them from that tent, it didn't give them time to grab the gear they needed. It didn't give them a choice. It just gave them a death sentence in the snow. The broken cedar branches tell their own story. Someone climbed high enough to break branches 15 feet up, in the dark, in killing cold. Probably Doroshenko. He was the tallest. Imagine that climb, bare feet finding purchase on frozen bark, burned hands gripping whatever they could, fighting to get fuel for a fire that was already failing, fighting to get high enough to maybe see something, maybe signal for help that wasn't coming, maybe just to delay the inevitable for another few minutes. The search team photographer documents everything with shaking hands, not from cold, from what he's seeing through his viewfinder. The way Krivonyshenko's body lies, arms at strange angles, the expression frozen on his face, the way Doroshenko seems to be reaching for something that isn't there. These aren't just bodies. These are the final moments of 2 lives captured in ice and snow, preserved like some horrible museum exhibit of human desperation. The camera clicks sound too loud in the forest silence. One detail stops everyone cold: Doroshenko's foot. Part of it is missing, not torn off by animals or frostbite. Cut off, clean cuts. Someone took flesh from his leg and foot. The investigators look at each other with sick understanding. The other hikers found these bodies first, before they died themselves, and they were desperate enough to try to use the flesh for something. Maybe food, maybe just warmth against their own freezing skin. Survival does terrible things to the human mind. The clothing scattered around the cedar tells another story. Fragments of sweaters, pieces of pants. Someone tried to salvage what they could from the dead. The living took clothes from friends who no longer needed them. It's logical. It's survival instinct, and it's heartbreaking. These were close friends, people who shared meals and jokes and songs around campfires. Now they were stripping clothes from frozen corpses to stay alive for a few more hours. The mountains don't care about friendship, only survival. The investigators measure everything: distance from the tent, height of broken branches, temperature of the ground where the fire burned, trying to build a timeline from frozen evidence. The 2 Yuris reached this spot maybe an hour after leaving the tent. They had time to climb the tree, time to gather wood, time to start a fire, but not time to make it matter. The cold worked faster than their survival skills. Hypothermia doesn't negotiate. It doesn't give second chances. It just takes what it wants. As they prepare to move the bodies, one investigator notices something else: scratches in the cedar bark, high up where the branches were broken. Not from climbing. These are different, deliberate marks, like someone was trying to carve something. A message maybe, or just desperate scratching from hands that had nothing left to do but claw at wood. The bark is frozen too hard to read what might have been attempted. Some final communication lost to winter silence. The forest feels different now. What started as a search mission has become something else. Something darker. The investigators know there are 7 more bodies out there somewhere. 7 more friends who died in ways they haven't discovered yet. The cedar tree will haunt their dreams. The image of 2 young men dying together, trying to keep each other warm with a failing fire and burned hands, trying to survive something that gave them no chance at all. The silence presses down like snow. They wrap the bodies carefully, respectfully. Krivonishenko and Doroshenko will go to the morgue for examination, but the questions will follow them. What drove them from safety? Why didn't they go back for supplies? What were they so afraid of that freezing to death seemed like the better option? The cedar tree keeps its secrets. The broken branches point toward an empty sky, and somewhere in that forest, 7 more answers wait beneath the snow. Invisible chains, the final attempts. The search teams aren't done yet. Those first 2 bodies by the cedar tree, that was just the beginning, because there are 3 more people still missing from Igor Dyatlov's group, and they're out there somewhere on that frozen slope, caught between the tent and the forest. What the searchers find next is going to paint a picture so heartbreaking, so desperate, that it'll haunt everyone who sees it. These aren't just bodies, they're final moments, frozen in time. March is bleeding into the search area, the snow starting to soften just enough to reveal what's been hidden underneath, and that's when they spot something dark against all that white, a shape that doesn't belong. The search teams move in closer, and their hearts just sink, because what they're looking at isn't random, it's not scattered, it's 3 people, positioned like they were moving with purpose, like they had somewhere desperately important to go. The first body they reach is about 1,000 feet from the cedar tree, closer to the tent, and the position, God, the position tells a story. This person was crawling, actually crawling uphill, through the snow, in the direction of their camp, arms stretched forward, legs positioned like they'd been pulling themselves along, fighting against the cold and the mountain and their own failing body, trying to get back to shelter that was still 500 feet away. It's Rustam Slobodin, 23 years old, engineering student, and he almost made it halfway back to the tent before hypothermia took him. His hands are positioned like he'd been clawing at the snow, pulling himself forward inch by frozen inch. The searchers can actually see the path he'd taken, a slight depression in the snow where his body had been dragging, a trail of determination that ends in death. But Rustam isn't alone up here. About 1,100 feet from the cedar tree, they find Zina Kolmogorova, 22 years old, the only woman in the group, and she's positioned the exact same way, facing uphill toward the tent, arms stretched forward, body frozen mid-crawl, like she'd been following the same desperate plan as Rustam. Get back to the tent, get back to warmth, get back to survival gear they'd left behind when they fled. The snow around Zina shows the same story, that slight depression where her body had been moving, the disturbed snow where her hands had been reaching, grasping, pulling. She'd made it further than Rustam. She'd gotten closer to the tent, but not close enough. The mountain claimed her just 450 feet away from shelter, 45 seconds of normal walking, a lifetime away when you're dying of cold. And then they find him, Igor Dyatlov, the expedition leader, the man whose name will be forever attached to this mystery. He's the furthest up the slope, the closest to the tent, 1,200 feet from the cedar tree, only 350 feet from the camp, so close he could probably see the orange fabric of their tent through the swirling snow. But he never made it, found face down, arms stretched towards salvation he'd never reach. The searchers stand there looking at Igor's body, and it hits them all at once. This wasn't panic. This wasn't random running into the night. This was a plan. 3 people, all attempting the same thing, all crawling up this slope in the same direction, all trying to get back to their tent, back to their supplies, back to the gear that might have saved them. But what stopped them wasn't just cold. Because here's what gets me about this scene. These 3 didn't die instantly. They didn't collapse and freeze. They fought. For God knows how long, they pulled themselves through the snow, knowing they were dying, knowing the cold was winning, but still believing they could make it back. Still believing those 350 feet to the tent were possible. Still believing in survival when their bodies were already shutting down. The positioning isn't random either. Igor's the furthest up the slope. He's the leader, so maybe he was leading this final desperate attempt. Zina's in the middle. Rustam's bringing up the rear, like they'd stayed together even in death, like they'd coordinated this last push for survival. A team until the very end, fighting together against an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't understand, couldn't defeat. Their clothing tells the same story as the others, minimal protection against sub-zero temperatures. Igor's wearing a sleeveless vest, thin pants, 1 boot. Zina's got a nightgown under her sweater, felt boots that are completely inadequate for this terrain. Rustam's barely better dressed, These people fled their tent so suddenly, so urgently, that they chose freezing over staying inside. What could be that terrifying? The autopsies reveal hypothermia as the cause of death for all three. But Igor shows signs of trauma too. A cracked skull, blood in his lungs, not enough to kill him, but enough to slow him down, enough to make that final crawl even more difficult, even more heroic, even more heartbreaking. He was injured, and still trying to save his team by getting back to their supplies. What haunts the investigators isn't just how they died, it's how long they lived, how far they made it. The snow conditions, the cold, their inadequate clothing. They should have died within minutes of leaving the tent. But these three made it over a mile. They built a fire, they tried to return, they fought for hours against impossible odds. That's not just survival instinct, that's something deeper. The slope between the tent and the cedar tree becomes a timeline of desperation. First the mad flight downhill, then the fire attempt, then this final push back towards safety. Three young people who refused to accept death, who crawled through snow and subzero wind, believing they could still save themselves, still save their friends. Their frozen hands reached toward a tent they'd never reach, toward answers we still don't have. Monsters underneath, snow den horrors. May 1959. The Ural snow finally starts melting. 3 months after the tent discovery. After 5 bodies already found, a Mansi hunter tracks through the ravine below Dead Mountain, following animal trails. The spring thaw reveals what winter buried. He notices something unnatural carved into a steep bank. Not animal, human-made. A crude shelter hollowed from packed snow and debris. The hunter approaches cautiously. Inside this makeshift den, he finds them, the final 4. But their condition defies everything investigators thought they understood. The snow cave sits 15 feet down in the ravine. Hand-dug, desperate work. Someone used clothing, branches, anything available to reinforce the walls. This wasn't panic construction. This took time, planning. The 4 bodies lie arranged inside like they were trying to stay warm together. But the Mansi hunter sees immediately, something is terribly wrong. These aren't the frozen, peaceful faces of hypothermia victims. These bodies tell a different story, a violent story, the kind that makes experienced investigators question their assumptions about what happened that February night. Lidumila Dubinio, 20-year-old economics student, found lying face down, her skull fractured. But that's not what shocks the investigators when they arrive. It's her chest, completely caved in, ribs shattered like kindling, no external wounds, no cuts, no bruises on the skin, just massive internal destruction. The force required to cause this damage, it's incomprehensible. Dr. Vozrozdeny, the forensic pathologist, will later compare it to being hit by a truck, but there are no tire tracks, no avalanche debris, no explanation. Alexander Kolovatov lies beside her. Same story, chest crushed from the inside out, 6 ribs broken. The pattern makes no sense. It's not blunt force trauma from above like an avalanche. It's not compression from burial. The bones are shattered outward, like something exploded inside their bodies. The 31-year-old graduate student's face shows no signs of struggle, no defensive wounds on his hands. Whatever happened, it was fast, too fast for him to react, too overwhelming to fight. Then there's Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, the 23-year-old with French heritage. His skull is fractured so severely that brain matter is visible. But again, no external injury. The scalp isn't even cut. How do you fracture someone's skull without damaging the skin? The forensic team photographs everything. Measures, documents. None of it makes medical sense. The injuries are massive, fatal, but they occurred without any visible external force. It's like something attacked them from inside their own bodies. The worst discovery? Lidumila's missing eyes. Both of them, gone completely. Not torn out, not damaged by animals or decomposition, surgically absent, and her tongue cut away cleanly at the root. The precision is disturbing. This isn't scavenger damage. This isn't natural decay. Someone, or something, removed them deliberately. The Mansi hunter who found the cave crosses himself and backs away. Even experienced forensic investigators struggle to process what they're seeing. This crosses every boundary of normal death. Dr. Vozrozdeny has performed thousands of autopsies, car accidents, industrial mishaps, war injuries, he knows trauma, but these bodies, they break all the rules. The internal damage equals what you'd see from a high-speed collision. Multiple vehicles, massive impact, but there's no corresponding external injury, no abrasions from pavement, no cuts from glass, no burn marks from explosions, just perfectly intact skin, covering completely destroyed internal structures. It's medically impossible, yet here it is, documented, photographed, undeniable. The radiological examination adds another layer of mystery. Massive internal hemorrhaging, organs displaced by the force of impact, blood pooled in body cavities that should be empty, but the skin shows no bruising, no swelling, no indication that any force touched these people from outside. The pathologist documents everything meticulously. Measurements, angles, force calculations. Every detail points to the same impossible conclusion. Something generated enormous pressure from within their bodies. But what and how? The investigating team exchanges glances, whispered conversations. This goes beyond their experience, beyond normal police work. These aren't avalanche victims. These aren't hypothermia deaths like the other 5. These are something else entirely. The lead investigator writes carefully in his report. He knows his words will be scrutinized, questioned, challenged, but he cannot ignore the evidence, cannot rationalize away the impossible injuries, cannot explain how 4 experienced hikers suffered massive trauma while building shelter in an empty ravine. Compare this to the other 5 bodies, found on the slope, in the forest. Those made sense. Hypothermia, exposure, natural deaths in extreme cold. Tragic but explainable. These 4, they died violently, suddenly, from forces that left no external trace. The contrast is stark, unsettling. It suggests 2 different events, 2 different causes of death. The initial escape from the tent, and then something else, something that hunted down the survivors, something that left them broken inside their own skin. The ravine location tells its own story. Deep, sheltered from wind, a logical place to seek protection. The snow cave shows intelligence. Planning, these weren't people fleeing in panic anymore. They had time to think, to build, to try surviving until rescue. They gathered branches, arranged clothing for insulation, worked together to create shelter, and then something found them. Something that could crush bones without breaking skin, something that harvested eyes and tongues with surgical precision, something that defies natural explanation. The official report struggles with language. How do you document the impossible? Investigators interview experts, military personnel, medical specialists. No one has seen anything comparable. The closest parallel? Blast victims from nuclear testing, bodies destroyed by pressure waves. But there was no blast here. No radiation beyond trace amounts on some clothing, no crater, no debris pattern, just 4 young people dead from forces that shouldn't exist, in a place where nothing could generate such power. The implications terrify everyone involved. If natural forces can't explain this, what can? The photographs circulate through closed channels. Military investigators examine the site. Geologists study the terrain. Physicists calculate force vectors. Every expert reaches the same conclusion. This shouldn't be possible, yet the evidence is undeniable. 4 bodies, massive internal trauma. No external cause, no rational explanation. The mystery deepens with every measurement, every calculation, every failed attempt to make sense of the evidence. The Mansi hunter returns to his village, speaks in whispers about what lives in the mountains. The investigators pack their cameras, their measurements, their impossible findings. The snow den remains empty. Now, a cavity in the earth where 4 young people met something beyond human understanding. Their bodies tell a story that rational minds struggle to accept. Internal destruction without external cause, surgical removal of organs, deaths that challenge everything we know about physics, about anatomy, about what's possible in our world. The Vanishing Veil, Unraveling Theories, May 1959, 3 months after the last body was discovered. Soviet investigator Lev Ivanov closes the case with a conclusion that raises more questions than answers. Unknown compelling force. That's it. 4 words to explain why 9 experienced hikers died in circumstances that defied logic. No avalanche debris found, No evidence of human attack. No rational explanation for the tent slashed from inside. Just an unknown compelling force. And with that bureaucratic phrase, Ivanov seals away the files for 30 years, leaving the mystery to fester in darkness. But mysteries don't stay buried, especially not when they're this strange. That vague official conclusion, it's like throwing gasoline on a fire. Over the decades, theories multiply like snowflakes in a blizzard, each one trying to explain the inexplicable. Avalanches, military weapons testing, psychological panic, infrasound phenomena, ball lightning, radiation exposure, even wilder possibilities that push the boundaries of what we're willing to consider. Every theory seems to explain some of the evidence, but none explain all of it, and that's what makes this case so enduringly haunting. Let's start with the most rational explanation. Avalanche. Makes sense, right? Mountain, snow, winter conditions. But here's the problem. There was no avalanche debris around the tent. None. The tent was found exactly where they pitched it, covered by wind-blown snow, not buried under tons of avalanche material. Plus, the slope wasn't steep enough, only 15 to 20 degrees. Avalanches need at least 30 degrees to trigger naturally. The Swiss did a study in 2021, proposed a delayed slab avalanche, but it still doesn't explain the tent being cut from inside, or the missing clothing. Then there's the military angle. This was 1959, height of the Cold War. The Soviets were testing all kinds of weapons. Maybe the hikers stumbled into a secret test zone. There were reports of orange lights in the sky that night from other witnesses. Could have been rocket tests. Or worse, what if they witnessed something they weren't supposed to see? That might explain the massive internal injuries on 4 of the bodies, blast trauma, but it doesn't explain why they cut their way out of the tent first. If you're under attack, you don't stop to grab a knife. Here's where things get really interesting. Infrasound. These are sound waves below human hearing range, but they can still affect us, make us feel dread, panic, disorientation. Mountains can create infrasound under certain wind conditions. The theory goes that natural infrasound drove the hikers into irrational panic, causing them to flee their shelter. It would explain the sudden, seemingly irrational decision to cut through the tent. But infrasound doesn't cause massive chest fractures. It doesn't remove eyes and tongues. The panic theory only explains part of what happened that night. Some theories venture into stranger territory. Ball lightning, a rare atmospheric phenomenon that could explain the orange lights and possibly create electromagnetic effects. Maybe it hit their tent directly. Others point to military experiments with electromagnetic weapons or psychological warfare drugs. There's even speculation about encounters with, well, let's just say phenomena that challenge our understanding of what's possible. But here's the thing about exotic theories. They often require us to ignore basic physics, and the evidence at Dyatlov Pass is frustratingly physical. Bodies, injuries, torn fabric, snow patterns. Then there's the radiation. Low levels of radioactive contamination found on some of the clothing. Not enough to be lethal, but enough to be weird. Where did it come from? One theory suggests they encountered radioactive military debris. Another points to contamination from Igor Dyatlov's part-time work at a nuclear facility. Or maybe it came from the thorium mantles in their camping lanterns. But radiation doesn't explain the behavioral anomalies that night. People don't flee into deadly cold because their shirts are slightly radioactive. There has to be something else. The missing eyes and tongue still haunt investigators. Lyudmila Dubinina, found in the ravine with her facial features gone. The coroner called it natural decomposition, but that doesn't satisfy everyone. Some point to scavenging animals. Others suggest more sinister explanations. Chemical burns from unknown substances. Trauma from whatever caused those massive chest injuries. Or something else entirely. The tissue loss creates this horror movie element that transforms a hiking tragedy into something much darker, something that feels almost deliberate. But by what? And why just her? The tent itself remains the central mystery, cut from inside, multiple slashes made with knives. This wasn't panic, it was methodical, like they were trying to escape something inside the tent. But what? No evidence of fire, no toxic gas, no animal attack. Some theories suggest they heard something outside, something so terrifying they chose to destroy their only shelter rather than face it. Others propose they saw something through the tent walls, Orange lights, shapes moving in the darkness, but experienced hikers don't panic over shadows. Weather data from that night shows brutal conditions, winds up to 60 miles per hour, temperatures around -13 Fahrenheit, but with wind chill feeling like -50. These weren't hiking conditions, they were survival conditions. Some researchers think severe weather created unusual atmospheric phenomena, ice crystal formations that created optical illusions, wind patterns that generated terrifying sounds. Maybe nature itself created the unknown compelling force. But even in extreme weather, experienced mountaineers don't abandon their shelter unless something is fundamentally wrong. The indigenous Mansi people had avoided that mountain for generations. Kholat Syakhl, Dead Mountain. They had stories about why you don't camp there, warnings passed down through oral tradition. Maybe they knew something the Soviet hikers didn't. Some researchers have tried to collect these old stories, looking for clues about natural phenomena the Mansi observed over centuries. Unusual weather patterns, animal behavior, geological instability. But oral traditions often mix fact with folklore. Separating scientific observation from cultural mythology becomes nearly impossible when the stories are this old. Modern investigations keep trying to solve this. In 2019, Russian prosecutors reopened the case, eventually concluding it was an avalanche after all. In 2021, Swiss researchers used computer modeling to propose their slab avalanche theory. These studies apply sophisticated science to 60-year-old evidence, but they're still trying to reverse engineer an explanation from incomplete data. How do you reconstruct atmospheric conditions from one winter night 6 decades ago? How do you account for all the variables we can't measure anymore? Sometimes the passage of time makes mysteries harder to solve, not easier. What keeps this case alive isn't just the mystery, it's what the mystery represents. 9 young people, full of life and dreams, encountering something on a remote mountainside that we still can't explain. It challenges our belief that everything has a rational explanation, that science can eventually solve every puzzle. Maybe what happened at Dyatlov Pass was just a tragic convergence of natural phenomena, or maybe it was something else entirely, something that reveals gaps in our understanding of what's possible in this world. The truth is, we may never know what really happened that February night. The mountain keeps its secrets. Snow has covered and uncovered that campsite thousands of times since 1959. But Dead Mountain remained silent. 9 friends went to sleep in their tent, and something drove them into the killing cold. Whatever it was powerful enough to override every survival instinct they possessed. And that might be the most unsettling part of all, not knowing what could be that compelling, that terrifying, that utterly beyond our understanding of how the world works.